Hello. I had posted a picture of a shirt I'd made on the Facebook page demonstrating a technique I was playing with, which is a sort of a distressed look on your vinyl. Well, this shirt's not perfect, but I liked the way the effect turned out, so I thought I'd do a video on how I got that distressed look in the vinyl. So I've just drawn this little picture here, and I'm going to demonstrate with that. So the first thing you need to do is go to Google, and you can search for distressed texture or grunge texture. All sorts of things might come up with a good texture to play with. I've already got one picked out that worked for me before, and it's this one here. I'm going to click on View Image to get a bigger copy of it. Right click, Copy Image, and then I'm going to go back to my document and paste it in over here. Control V to paste. I'm going to press the minus key to zoom out, and I'm going to do a bitmap trace. So that's under Path, Trace Bitmap, but I like to use shortcuts, so I press Shift, Alt, and B. Okay, so my bitmap trace window comes up. I'm going to use brightness cutoff, threshold 0.45, which is the default. But on options, normally this is suppress speckles is set at 2. This is a very busy image, and I want to suppress speckles to just trace the bigger chunks. So I'm going to increase this to 60, and then I'll say OK and close this window. Now I can drag my bitmap trace off to the side, and I can delete my original image. You can play around with the sizing of this. Do we want the speckles to be bigger or smaller? You can rotate it. Might look better if it's rotated a little. You just play around and see what you like. Maybe a little bit bigger. Okay. Now I've put this navy background back here because I've imagined this on a navy shirt. If you were doing it on a white shirt, you wouldn't put a background. To get an idea of what your speckles, your distressed texture is going to look like, you can press Control Shift F to bring up your fill menu. I've selected my texture. I'll pick the eyedropper tool, and then I'll click on this navy over here, and that turns my distressed texture to navy. So that's what gives me an idea of what this would look like on a shirt if I cut this out and put it on a navy shirt. So you can play around, get the placement just exactly the way you like it so it's not messing up your letters too much or whatever. Okay, but we'll just say, for the sake of getting it done, that looks good. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press the End key to send this texture layer all the way to the back of the stack. So now it's in the back. Alright, I'm going to press Control D to duplicate it. The duplicate goes on top. Now I'm going to press Shift and Alt, and that allows me to select what's behind the top layer. So when I click, I've selected Distress, or my text. Okay, so now I've got my texture layer on top, Distress behind. I'm going to do Path Difference to cut the little speckles out of. Okay, now it did it. I can pull this off to the side, and you can see that it cut little pieces out. Control Z to get that back where it was. I'm going to do the same thing. I click on my texture layer, Control D to duplicate. I'll press Shift and Alt to select the green square and Path Difference. Okay, now you can see it's cut little speckles out of the green. One last time, Control D, Shift Alt, select the pink square, and Control Shift minus, which is the same thing as Path Difference. Okay, I don't need my texture anymore. I can put that off to the side in case I decide I need it again. Alright, so I'm going to zoom in on this a little, select everything and press 3 to center that on my screen. One thing we'll have to do is, if you notice, I click on this and I look down here, and that path has 2,295 nodes. That's kind of a lot. It would be very time consuming because the Cricut's going to stop at every node and change direction, but we can simplify that. And this is Inkscape 0.92, which is the latest version. It's got a cool tool. If you go to Path, Path Effects, now you've opened your Path Effects window over here. We're going to add a path effect. If you type in SI, it gets you down to Simplify. Click on that and add your path effect to the window. Now it's simplified and it's got it down to 201 nodes, but you notice it looks kind of weird. It doesn't, I mean, you might be going for that effect, but I'm not. I don't want it to be quite that simplified. So I can change this roughly threshold. And playing around with it, I found that 0.0009 worked pretty well if I press enter. Now you can see the text isn't quite as warped. You can play around with different numbers here, but generally the lower the number, the less simplified it's going to be. So we're going to do the same thing with these other two, or add simplify. We'll change this to 0.0009. Okay, and I'm going to copy that so I don't have to type it again, and do the same thing with my pink square. Control V to paste in my number, enter, and now you see I've simplified. Distress had like 2,000 nodes, now it's got 347. I don't remember how many of these have, but now it's got less. Okay, now I'm going to close the path. Now I'm going to leave that open. One thing to point out, I'm going to click on Distress and then press 3 to get it a little bigger. I'm going to click on the Node tool. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. You can see all these weird little blue circles and squares, and what that's telling you is that this path effect that we've added is just sort of an overlay. It's not the real path. If you were to send this into Design Space right now, it would just cut the original path, which had 2,000 nodes. So what we need to do is go to Path, Object to Path, and it'll take a little bit of time, but it converted it to a path. Okay, I'm pressing the minus key to zoom out. So we need to do the same thing. Object to Path, Object to Path, and now we've got them all converted. Now the last thing you need to do, and it's going to depend on the texture that you picked and how you played with it, but if I click on Distress, 3 to zoom in, I'm going to click on the nodes, I'm going to close the Path Effects window, and I'm just going to look and see if I've got stray. I'm pressing the plus key to zoom in even further, and so I see like a little stray node here. It's going to make cutting weird, so I'm just going to get rid of that. I'm just going to go through, and depending on the settings you use, you can minimize this step. Here's some extra nodes here, so that this isn't such a task. Let me get rid of that there. That's never gonna be able to weed that. Okay, and then I'll just do the same thing. These look pretty good, actually. I think all of those will cut. And if you miss a few in weeding, it doesn't really matter. And here is the reason I like to do that thing where I duplicated the texture, because the texture goes across different color blocks that you have. So this one right here, I might kind of simplify that a little by deleting a few nodes and pulling the handles, just because it'd be a kind of goofy cut. Just kind of move them around a little. I'm looking for anything that's really small and not going to cut well. This is kind of weird here, so I'll delete some of those and move that around. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And that's pretty much it. If I was going to send this to Design Space, I would get rid of my navy background, just like that. And I would save as Distress. I'm going to give it a number. And then that's ready to put into Design Space, and you can cut it out and get something like that. Thanks for watching.